My name is Ro Spankie. I'm an architect, but for the last 20 years, I've been teaching and writing about interior space, and particularly how people construct their identity and sense of home using evocative objects. And I refer a lot to psychoanalysis in this. But the reason I'm in the room today is I met Fay and Judy at the Freud Museum, and they said, "Would I like to create a show?" I wasn't totally sure what a curator was, but my understanding of what my role was to create a conversation around their work that might throw up sort of new ideas, which is why all of us are in the room today. It's a sort of major point of this. When I met them at the Freud Museum, they just finished a really successful exhibition called Breathe, which was about mourning and loss at the Freud Museum. And both of them had lost a parent when very young. What's really interesting to me, talking about the work, they weren't connected so much through having lost a parent, but the way that they use their creative process to work through that mourning and loss. Fay in particular, she draws objects that she found from her when her father passed away in his house. So objects like the sort of signature object is the souvenir fan, but she draws that as a memory of her mother. And also to work through her feelings towards her mother's death, which happened much younger in her childhood. Well, Judy took up photography, which was something that her father was passionate about, and through being a photographer began to understand a man that she never knew, because he died when she was just a baby. Now, to explain travelling companions, I'm going to talk a little bit about Freud's desk, which is a mini landscape that I love. There's 65 objects on Freud's desk. There's a mixture of figurines, smoking paraphernalia, and writing implements. And it's been subject of much speculation and analysis, but what everyone seems to agree is they're not just ornaments and tools, they've got some sort of emotional content. And one of the kind of evidences of that is every year the Freud family would leave the centre of Vienna when it got very hot and have a holiday house on the edge of town. And Freud would take the analytic couch, the desk, and all the objects, and all be carted out to the suburbs so he could continue to see patients and write. And when he went on holiday, he actually packed some of the figurines with him because he couldn't really at some point think without. And these are my prototypical travelling companions. A lot of people have written about it. Marina Warner called them tools of thought or kitchen utensils of his imagination, offering rest, refuge, and encouragement. Other people saying they were like signposts to his thoughts. But whatever else they are, it's really clear the desk isn't functional in the way an architect might use the word function. It's a facilitating environment, and that when he sat with this sort of collection, it allowed him to feel safe and be creative. Now, objects play a really important role within psychoanalysis. The word is used both to describe representations of significant figures within the psyche, such as a mother object or a love object, but also a process where memories and feelings of such figures can be transferred onto actual objects, such as a transitional object where a child can have feelings for the mother transferred onto a teddy bear or even a nappy, and they can take that along with them and get the comfort from it, or say a woman's stocking, which as a fetish object can generate sexual excitement. With these objects, they bring pleasure and they also ward off anxiety and are really important to their owner. And then just as Marcel Proust, the most famous person writing about this maybe, would say, as he talked about his aunts dipping a Madeleine in a cup of tea and the memories it brought back, it's not the Madeleine that's significant, but the trace that it opens up. So in Fay's case, her mother's fan is a souvenir from Spain, but her mother actually died on the holiday that they were on. So the fan then represents the mother, and then the drawing of the fan represents the mother, and then even drawings that she can do from memory of the fan have these representations, bringing emotional and intellectual comfort and anchoring memories, and also provoking new ideas. So there's creativity around these objects. And it was these type of evocative objects that we called travelling companions. So I hope that kind of explains how we've sort of seen them. I also just wanted to say that as an architect, I was really fascinated by the contrast of scales between Judy's huge photographs of the night skies and Fay's really detailed interior drawings. The two scales representing the personal and the collective. Sense of the far away, but also the familiarity of home. And traditionally, constellations of stars have acted as navigational tools, guiding travellers and giving directions. So Judy's depictions of the heavens act as travelling companion in a different sort of way to Fay's domestic objects. Now, Of course, this idea is not original. You've probably all got examples of things yourself. And so we thought, as a way of sort of opening up the debate around what we were trying to do in this exhibition, we invited 34, we called them fellow travellers, from both the sciences and the arts, to describe their own travelling companions with both an image and a short written description. And this is up as a digital exhibition at the moment. We're releasing them with 5 people at a time, and you can find it on the Crash website, and I really recommend, if you haven't started engaging with that you did. And they're a really interesting mix. There's things where people have a representation of themselves, a representation of somebody they love, of home, but also things they feel they can't travel without, and that just might be like a totemic thing. It doesn't have to be literally practical. And we're delighted today to have 5 of the contributors with us and to make a discussion around the subject of the travelling companion. So we have writer and architect Aruajo, who's here. We have art historian and priest Ayla Lepine. We have material culture. Sarah's researching into the material culture of polar exploration. There is a queer theorist and expert in science and technology studies, Benjamin Weil. And we had M Pompea, but I'm afraid he can't be here because he had to fly from Arizona and because of all the things with the coronavirus. So he'd sent us, he's an astronomer, and he sent us a film which we will see. But we're really delighted that Hewison has been prepared to step onto the panel at the last minute. And he also has a short film, because he wasn't going to be here originally. I'm just going to read you his biography, because he's not in the programme. So he's a writer and arts journalist. He made a special study of John Ruskin, and published widely in the field of post-war British culture. He wrote on theatre and the arts for the Sunday Times for 35 years, and has held chairs at Lancaster City University in Oxford, where he was the Slade Professor in 2000. The way the seminar is going to work is each of the panel, we're going to give really short descriptions, just 5 minutes, about their travelling companion and what it means to them, and then we're going to open up for discussion between the panel, and we're really hoping that all of you will contribute too. So I was going to start with Fay.
So I brought with me this watch today. It's a Satina watch, Swiss made. I traced it, it's around the early 1960s, has a gold face, it's got a nylon handle. I'm not at all interested in its function, that it's a timekeeping device, nor am I interested in the fact that it was once a commodity either. This watch is my mother. I've never taken it out. This is its first outing, in fact, since I stole it from the side table in the bedroom where my mother died when I was 7 years old in Spain. She died very suddenly. There was no preparation, and we drove back to London afterwards. This was in 1964, summer of 1964. And we didn't talk about her again during my lifetime with my father alive. So it wasn't until 2009, when my father died, that I was mourning his loss, and a huge opening erupted inside me. I realised I was really mourning for my mother. After all those years, when I had to sort of forget that I had a mother. So what happened to that watch from 1964 to today? Well, it lived in a drawer. I never looked at it. I was conscious it was there, but I thought it was illegal. It shouldn't be looked at, because there was this sort of rule, I suppose, which was, you don't talk about the mother, my mother. When my father died, soon after, I got the watch out, started to look at it, and I was passionate about drawing it, because I thought, if I draw it, there'll be a reconnection to my mother. So, my mother was snatched away from me, but I do have the watch, and it is her. It's my only connection to her. I love the fact it's slightly greasy. The watch strap is dirty. I'd like to think it smells of her. I'd like to know that she wore it, and that I'm holding it now. These are vitally important things to me. And when I'm thinking about these things, I'm thinking about the child who's going around maybe garden with a broomstick, pretending it's a horse. And I'm thinking, well, am I engaging in that sort of play? And I'm very interested in psychoanalysis, so I'm very interested in Donald Winnicott's ideas, great psychoanalyst and paediatrician. He writes about play in a great book, Play and Reality, and he describes it as a zone where when you're playing, you take yourself, your inner self, and you're aware of external reality, so both meet somewhere in this zone. And I think this is what I might be doing. Other people might have other views, but I have a feeling I'm playing, I'm suspending reality, and bringing my inner self. And that space he called the transitional space, which Ro then talked about transitional object very briefly. So if we go back to Winnicott's ideas about the transitional object, we've got this baby who believes that it and mother are one. Then it starts to grow and realises that baby and mother are separate. And in order to, as you said, lessen our anxiety, bring comfort, it latches onto maybe a teddy bear, a piece of cloth, or whatever. And this brings deep comfort to the baby. And if it's a cloth or a teddy bear, and I notice this with my daughter at home, the object becomes quite dirty. It becomes part of them. It is part of them. It's part of them, part me, part mother, part external world. And if you took that teddy bear, for example, if I'd taken my daughter's little monkey and put it in the washing machine, it would destroy it completely. I mean, the dirt and the body smells are all part of me. So I see this as really my transitional object. And then I wanted to just read a couple of quotes from others who've written about objects. One is Christopher Bolas, a Freudian psychoanalyst, in his book, The Evocative Object World. And he describes objects as memory containers of lived experience. Memory containers of lived experience. And during childhood, parts of the self's experience would be projected into the objects. I find that a very powerful statement. Then I want to move on to Professor Sherry Turtle, who actually took part in our Objects of the Week. She's a psychologist at MIT, and she has a wonderful book called Evocative Objects. And quoting her, she says, "We find it familiar to consider objects as useful," and I'm thinking of something like a tin opener, or aesthetic, so I might buy myself a very lovely ceramic vase, as necessities, so that could be my toothbrush, or vain indulgences, and that could be, I can't resist another dress. She asks us, though, to consider objects as companions to our emotional lives, or as provocations to thought. And I think for me, yes, that rings so true. And then Professor Daniel Miller, who's an anthropologist working at UCL, University College London, and he has a wonderful book called Stuff. And he says in that book that objects represent and create us. He says, our houses with stuff are autobiographies. People create themselves through stuff. We are able to see ourselves in this extension of ourselves and understand who we are. He also says, moving house with stuff provides a means to reshuffle relationships and memories by bringing them back into consciousness, by making them explicit, and for deciding which ones to reinforce, to abandon. And I think for me, that's a great phrase, because I think with my memory boxes, I could then do what he's saying. I could start editing the past. I could start being the curator, in a sense, of my own life, and deciding what on earth I wanted to put into those boxes that, for me, represented my life. And of course, it's It's an idealised view, it's not a realistic view. And I recently heard him talk at UCL, and there was one statement he made that really resonated. He says, and this is very relevant again to the watch, we can't control the date when our loved ones die, but we can control how and when we separate from the personal objects associated with those we've lost. And finally, one more thought I had. The watch and I have a very active relationship. It's not a passive relationship, and I think many objects, I've got my beaker of water down there, they're fairly passive, but this is very active, and it asks things of me as much as I ask things of it. And that's what I want to say.
Judy, speak.
My choice of object is all about looking and seeing, and this actually is my retina. I don't know if any of you had your retina image, but this is currently mine. And I've written a poem about it. All horizons seem internal to my eye, which senses inside itself a tropical world, with crackling black lightning, a yellow sun presiding over the secret flora of my short green lids from a coral sky. These roaming globes have received the dark light of chambers of Egyptian tombs, crumbling rocks of the Indolora caves, the translucent modes of Ladakh, and the stars in the Negev desert. Suspended Saturn, and in the dusty wings of a sparrow, faraway galaxies, sadness, the flesh of the birth of my grandchild, and fleetingly my father, dead after just 12 months of my life. Long gone grandparents, these globes still looking into my mother's eyes, my children's eyes, my children's children's eyes too, all enthralled by the light and my lens on the world. The retina is to the eye as a film is to a camera. It's deemed to be very stable and hardly apparently changes during a lifetime. Because of the high number of unique data points the retina possesses, there is almost no error when an identity of an individual is confirmed. It is truly that person, that individual, that signature. So this image is truly me. It's my body, myself. The light striking the retina initiates a cascade of chemical and electrical events that ultimately trigger nerve impulses that are sent to various visual centres of the brain through the fibres of the optic nerve. The retina is the innermost light-sensitive layer of tissue of the eye. Which leads me on to photography, which has been my passion from when I was first given my box brown. It augmented for me the magic of looking, which enhanced and bewitched me, from the darkness of the computer to the somewhat questionable liberation of working on a computer. The objects that I'm looking at here in this exhibition are way in the past. They generate for me a condition of intimate immensity. Photography and looking is crucial. I feel I've always been a slight outsider, an observer, initially a portrait photographer since early on, and I moved through portraiture to a fascination with photography in general, and with looking, life drawing, painting, filmmaking, and making artist books, active looking. But I've also been impelled to go to the mountains, to be with nature, and to watch the heavens, which is quite hard to do in London, where I live. This was my experience, the experience of looking with the residencies that I've been lucky enough to have. They're all situated on top of the most sacred spots imaginable on Earth, in the Rockies, the Andes, Mauna Kea in Hawaii, and latterly, which wasn't so magical, the small observatory at UCL on the A41 in Mill Hill. These beautiful buildings are sacred places built on magical, sacred ground, high, usually on mountain plateaus, hallowed territory, and a window to the world beyond, and a key to our mysteries. My first residency was in Kitt Peak National Observatory, which is a mountain in Arizona. home to one of the largest arrays of optical and radio telescopes in the world, with 3 nighttime telescopes, 22 optical and 2 radio telescopes. We, which was my friend Jane and I, who's here in the audience today, were given a house there and embedded in the rarefied atmosphere of nighttime existence. We had a key to all the telescopes. There were dormitories, night cafeterias, a self-sufficient ecosystem and a very green way of living. Everything for us was taken care of, so no need to think of anything, apart from being in the landscape, in the dark, and watching the skies. We also had access to the observing astronomers, long nighttime chats as they observed, and we were in the position of observing the observers. Most of the observing is data, so for me, completely impossible to understand, but there were a few visual telescopes, the most exciting for me being the McMath Solar Telescope, which was built like a giant 7 on its side, something like out of James Bond film, and quite a lot of work in the show is from that telescope. Chile, the next residency, which we were able to go to, was for the launch of something called the Dark Energy Camera. Dark energy, that thing we cannot see, mysterious and invisible, outside our receptors, is estimated to make up 85% of all matter in the universe. But despite decades of study and numerous different theories and tests to find its origin, it has remained a shadowy enigma. I attempted, while enjoying the privilege of being there, to try and imagine what it might be, all the while producing artist books to satisfy my curiosity. The confluence between art and science is that extraordinary thing of not knowing and trying to find out. We were lucky enough to catch the last of the observers observing in the residencies, as now the work on telescopes is done mainly remotely, with just a skeleton team based on the telescopes high up, so that the astronomers don't have to waste time travelling and acclimatising to the altitude. But wow, we were so lucky to be in those spaces. It is that stimulation, excitement, being in these silent places together with the scientists and astronomers, to be with these scientists who are so passionate about their particular subject, often incredibly narrow. The dedication, enthusiasm and passion is beyond anything I have ever encountered in my life. Sharing this passion, photographing the machinery, the operators, that immense curiosity, trying to find out, why are we here? What is it? Why? And my retina, my chosen travelling companion, recording both physically and metaphorically, words both forgotten and as yet unseen. So it's now my pleasure to pass on to you Steve Pompea, who was meant to be here but isn't. So he's made a film for us, which none of us have seen, with Going Commando, I think.
This is his object.
This is his object.
If you go on to the object of the week, then that'll be the film.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Pompea, an astronomer at the U.S. National Observatory. I'm very happy to be able to participate in the Traveling Companion exhibition, though apologies are in order that I can't be there in person. I first met Judy and her brilliant work when she was an artist in residence at our observatories in Tucson and later Chile and Hawaii. She reminded us how art and science are very similar in that they're both highly experimental and courageous approaches to understanding the universe and expressing that understanding. As you may know, astronomers are very much preoccupied with time, looking both forwards and backwards. We study some of the smallest and fastest events in the universe that happen in millions and millions and millions and millions of a second. We also study things that happened over billions of years of time. And now we found ways to relate some of the events in the early universe that happened almost instantaneously to some of the things that are happening in the evolution of the universe over billions of years. We're very comfortable with both large and small amounts of time. And of course, astronomy had its beginning with timekeeping, and we still perform that function to keep track of time. And in doing that, we've noticed a number of things, such as that the Earth's rotation is slowing down and the days becoming longer. The moon is moving farther away from the Earth, and the length of the month is a bit longer, and things like that that are very small changes on a year-to-year basis, but can be very, very big changes over long periods of time. My personal traveling companion is an object from millions of years ago, a necklace with a fossilized ammonite shell that has made quite a journey. It started off as a living creature swimming in the oceans and related to our modern chambered nautilus. After it died, it fell to the ocean bottom, became fossilized and buried in many layers of sediment. Eventually, it was uplifted to the tops of the highest mountains on Earth through tectonic forces, and then later, through erosion, was knocked down by gravity to the bottom of a river gorge near Annapurna, where it was found and revered as a sacred object and made into a necklace. The necklace and its fossil connect me to two very different friends. It was a present from one friend, Billie Jean, who knew of my research with another friend, Peter Kahn. We were studying the evolution of the Earth-Moon system using fossil nautiloids. Speaking of traveling companions, the moon has been a traveling companion of the Earth for a very, very long time. In fact, since the earliest times when both were formed. Peter and I were researching how the biological rhythms of the chambered nautilus and its fossil ancestors might give us a clue as to the evolution of the Earth-Moon system and the changes in the orbit of the moon. The fossil reminds me of my two friends who are both gone. Both were suddenly taken away by time, before their time. One was a superb poet and teacher, the other a superb geologist and stratigrapher studying the layers of the Earth. They both persist through time. Billie Jean James and Peter Gustavus Kupfer Kahn are here right now inspiring me and inspiring this exhibition. I'm passing them on to you as your future traveling companions. They can help us remember the rhythms of time, the longevity of time, and the forces that mold our Earth and our human lives through time. Thank you.
So we're going to go to Sarah Pickman.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So my object is my own personal copy of Alfred Lansing's book, Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage, which was a gift from my mother. This book was originally published in the 50s. This is a paperback edition from many decades later that she had and always kept on her bedside table, and year after year insisted that I read. And finally, one very, very hot summer in New York when I was a master's student, I did read it. Many of you may be familiar with the story of Ernest Shackleton. If you're not, you can take a gamble about 20 minutes down the road to the Scott Polar Research Institute and learn all about him there. But Lansing was a journalist, and he captured this incredible voyage of Shackleton's in incredible prose. And the story kind of writes itself. Just the 30-second version is that in 1914, Shackleton and a small crew of roughly about 30 other men set sail. They were attempting to be the first group of people to cross the entire continent of Antarctica on foot. So the trek to the South Pole had been accomplished, but not the entire crossing of the continent. They were within a day of landing when the ice seized up around their ship. It was called the Endurance, after Shackleton's family motto, by endurance we conquer. And the ice pushed the ship back away from the Antarctic continent, and it pushed it back out into the open sea where the ice split up, and split up the boat with it. So the boat sank, and then there was this incredible journey where they had to spend months on ice floes and then in small boats, being marooned on a very rocky island, and then finally Shackleton and 5 others taking a small boat and traveling 800 miles doing a journey that had never been attempted before to a whaling station on South Georgia Island, then landing on the wrong side of the island, and 3 of them having to trek through the interior mountains, which again had never been accomplished before, getting help, finally being rescued about 2.5 years later. It's an extraordinary story, and Lansing relates it in this beautiful way. He actually spoke to some of the last survivors from that expedition who were still alive in the 50s. And so this book has become my traveling companion in 2 ways. One, because it prompted me to continue on a set of journeys that I hadn't ever thought that I would take. I became obsessed with the book, I became obsessed with polar explorers, and that prompted me to shift the course of my master's program a little bit to investigate the history of polar explorers and clothing, which was something that I already had an interest in, and then to go on to a PhD where I investigate the material culture of expeditions. So I'm interested in what men like Shackleton and his colleagues, fellow explorers from the late 19th and early 20th century actually had as their traveling companions and the kinds of things that they took with them on their own voyages. But the book's become my traveling companion in the second way, in that it's prompted the bigger questions of the dissertation and the things that have informed my own travels, especially travels that I've undertaken as I've been researching the project, which are why would you do a thing like this, especially in Shackleton's time. I found a lot of the existing academic answers very unsatisfying. National glory, interest in science, wanting to be a hero, wanting to be famous. And there are other ways that you can do all of those things. There are other ways that you can do all of those things without putting yourself and 24 others in potentially mortal danger. So why would you want to do something like that? So those are the kinds of questions that have propelled my own research and my own research travels, and like even my own personal travels, things that kind of stick in my brain and stay with me. And so I was thinking about why we look at objects, and some of the kind of academic answers as to why studying objects, studying material culture is important for a project like this and just in general. And some of the scholarly answers that various people have come up with are material culture gives us the voices of those who left no written records behind. So if you're studying history and you're mostly looking at texts, you're mostly looking at information from cultures with written languages. And you're mostly looking at elite people who in previous centuries may have been the only people who knew how to read and write. So looking at objects gives you even just a very small fragment, very small trace of people who left behind no written record, be they people from cultures without writing systems or people from non-elite backgrounds. Objects are ways that you see people attempt to solve problems of unfamiliar places. So this goes back to what Ro was saying about objects as the sort of comfort and ward against anxiety, and that in the kinds of things that Shackleton and his men brought, some practical items, scientific tools, bedding, warm clothing, but also things like marmalade and Leonard Hussey's famous banjo, which is now at the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich. Those kinds of things that we would look at and see as highly impractical luxuries, indulgences, but things that prevented certain kinds of anxieties, especially being in a very unfamiliar place like Antarctica, where they were the only human beings on that entire continent. The emotional comfort and comfort, I think, is very interesting. There are two scholars whose work I really look to: John Crawley, who's an art historian, and Catherine Greer, who is an art historian, American Studies, material culture specialist. And they look at the changing meanings of the term comfort. So we talk about objects as comforts of home, and that's really what things like the banjo and the marmalade were for the men on Shackleton's crew. But that comfort, the word comfort itself underwent a change in the 19th century, which both of these academics have pointed to. That comfort used to mean something that gave spiritual solace, the comfort of, say, a beloved Bible or a particular verse or something as spiritual succor. And that comfort underwent a change as we started to have more and more goods in the 19th century because of the Industrial Revolution. So comfort then came to mean something like familiarity with social norms, physical satisfaction with your surrounding environment, something much closer to what we understand today. And these emotional comforts reveal our fears and vulnerabilities. And finally, two other things that objects, especially in the case of an expedition, can be embodiments of culture. And these were men who were taking these items that really encapsulated Western culture and technology into this very unfamiliar place. Some of their colleagues would have been taking them into locations where there were indigenous people, and there were people who already had their own material culture, their own technology. So you were bringing literally the embodiment of your own place and time with you into the field. And that objects finally could be, in the context of something like this book, with the banjo, or the objects that Scott Kohler down the road, could be relics and reminders of individuals. So Shackleton came home lauded as a hero, and now anything that has touched Shackleton, anything that's touched anybody on his crew, is itself a kind of almost saintly, revered object. And kept in museums and beautifully preserved and turned to. This is the Shackleton boat. This is the piece of chocolate that he touched. This is his personal Bible. This is a scrap of clothing. And I want to end by giving the boss, as he was known to his crew, giving him a chance to speak in his own words. Because he spoke about objects. So almost 2 years later, when he and the entire crew were rescued, with only a few of the original thousands of physical objects they brought to Antarctica with them, he related these words that later ended up in his expedition account, which is called South, and I also recommend reading after you read the Lansing book. flung down the ads, the small ads, and also the logbook and the cooker wrapped in one of our blouses. That was all, except our wet clothes that we brought out of the Antarctic, which we had entered a year and a half before, with well-found ship, full equipment, and high hopes. That was all of tangible things, but in memories we were rich. We had pierced the veneer of outside things.
Now Benjamin Weil.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've just written a short 5-minute response for the object that I've chosen, which is the body, which is merely represented here. So we might expect any travelling companion for life to embody the properties of what the sociologist Bruno Latour has described as an immutable mobile, those objects or phenomena capable of travelling distances across space and time, all the while retaining a fixed form, effect, action or interpretable meaning. Money, maps, newspapers, books, these are all immutable mobiles. According to Latour, the fixity of these objects' physical forms is integral to their utility and their function, fixing in amber information for renewed visitation by a range of eyes and actors. In other words, the immutability of immutable mobiles allows them to, quote, act at a distance, spatial or temporal. Presumably, then, any object expected to meaningfully accompany us across the life course ought to be similarly mobile and similarly immutable. Yet, I have chosen as my object the body, a highly mutable thing, capable of changing markedly, sometimes unpredictably across the life course, in ways that I think, and hopefully I'll convince you, might potentiate change beyond what we consider to be our bodily boundaries. The body's effects on or in our lives is often muted by the prevailing Cartesian dualism that would siphon off our somatic capacities from those that govern our psychic, social, intellectual or creative ones. In the dominant culture, where the body works as it ought to, it hums quietly, out of mind. Those of us, however, who have experienced any period of disability or debility within a culture that would otherwise invisibilize the function of the normative body, know all too well how apparent the body and its sometimes ill effects can make themselves. Equally, those of us who have experienced any period of mental illness or unrest have felt all too well the limitations of the Cartesian epistemology, how in practice the psychic and the somatic are tightly knotted. Body-mind is the more holistic notion proposed by disability studies scholars to encapsulate the lived entanglements of the cerebral and the corporeal. So, I have chosen the body as my, or perhaps our, travelling companion for life, to foreground what is so often occluded in our biographies, except for those who live with disability, those who labour with their bodies, and, of course, specific instances of gendered bodily labour. In my own life, I have struggled with cycles of wellness and illness in body-mind that have often frustrated my attempts at typical or even ideal patterns of work. So I have been compelled to adapt, to take up non-normative rhythms of work when I can, and rest when I need or want to. And so succumbing to the well-being of body and mind has shed light on the contours of the necessary and the contingent in my academic life. What I mean by this is that by prioritising the health of my body, it's had the unexpected effect of reprioritising my political efforts. It has given me better insight into the academic cultures of overwork, the ableist expectations that are thrust onto staff and students, and therefore how academic precarity can be experienced as bodily exhaustion, as well as fear, anxiety, and financial struggle. Listening to the body, therefore, can be a surprising path to a politics that is rooted in empathy. As Bruno Latour puts it elsewhere, quote, to have a body is to learn to be affected, meaning effectuated, moved, put into motion by other entities, human or non-human. He says, if you are not engaged in this learning, you become insensitive, dumb, you drop dead, end quote. Most recently, via the repetitive ritual of exercise, I have found the body and its capacity for slow change to be a site of potent metaphor for the possibility of joy within sometimes taxing working life, what Foucauldian scholar of the body Cressida Hayes has referred to as ascesis, or, quote, the possibility of openness to self-creation and practicing ourselves into something new. In a study of Australian bodybuilders, sociologists J.R. Latham and colleagues describe how their participants noted an effect of the routine of exercise that permeated all other areas of their lives, the cultivation of a readily transferable work ethic. Similarly, I have begun to see gym going and its dialogic, incremental effects on the body in useful metaphorical terms, as a way to approach the long and often thankless task of writing a PhD thesis, which some of you may well know. Learning from the body and its entanglements with exercise has enabled me to emphasize and find hope in the ritualized daily process of writing, where a focus on mere outcomes can be fraught, hopeless, and sometimes elusive. So, the mutable body, I would like to conclude, is a reminder of our capacity for growth or for change. Thank you.
We now have Ayla Lepine.
My object was this camera. My traveling companion is this camera. And I bought this camera in a difficult moment in my life, and a moment where I think I felt like disabled. And I kind of needed, I would say, a prop for my own identity. And I was interested in it for its practical use. So, I got interested in photography. I developed my artistic skill. But I was also interested in it for its less practical and less kind of noble reasons. I felt that carrying this camera made me look cool. Made me look like, especially with the people that I was hanging out with. So one of the things that fascinates me about traveling companions, you may call them, I think I might call it a prop, is this ambiguity, is this duality that, at least in my experience, they can be our best friends and they at the same time can be our worst enemies. So they are a kind of a hint for kind of something that is usually related to a weakness, the desire to treat oneself, like the desire to consume, self-indulgence. And at the same time, they can lead you to something very, very profound about relating to self-discovery or relating to a learning experience. So I think that this duality is something that fascinates me, and it's this line, it's this fine line. Where do you stop? Where do you stop? Where do you tell yourself, well, I actually don't need that dress to kind of, to feel like I'm myself, or that pair of shoes, or that bag, and I find it really fascinating how similar the kind of psychological the psychological process is that leads you to something very profound and that can lead you to something very vain, and I think that for me life is this adventure where you almost kind of risking to fall into kind of the wrong path and kind of get carried away by something that has very similar qualities to, so to speak, the right path. And I think that like these objects, they are an interesting way to think through this. So recently I read a book which is called Pretentiousness, Why It Matters. and it's, the author is Dan Fox, and like the traveling companion, or like the prop, the pretentiousness is also a dubious word, right? Because it relates to this idea of thinking you're better than others, thinking you're more deserving than others, but also it's the pretense of the theater, right? So like taking up a role to convey a message, right? And what this author what this book very interestingly communicated to me was this idea that, we usually relate like transitional objects or I'm calling prop to our past, like to this idea of kind of making sense of our history, making sense of who we are, of our sense of identity. And he instead said that these objects, they connect us to our future. It's like, who do we want to be? So to pretend, to be pretentious is to pretend pretend even to yourself that you're something that you clearly know that you're not, but that you want to be, that you aspire to be. And then he really understands it in terms of this idea of this prop, something you hang on to, almost like a clutch, to take you to that place, to take your identity to that place where you actually want it to be. So and then the other interesting dubious word that relates to this is the idea of character. Because obviously to wear a prop, like I wore this camera for some time, is to take on a character, right? So and the character is also a dubious word that relates to this idea that you're pretending you're playing a role, but it also relates to a sense of kind of person has character, has a particularity, has something to say, has some kind of form of dignity. And so I thought it was very interesting, how this author concludes the book, saying that maybe where you draw the line of kind of where you're being purely self-indulgent, or where you're actually pursuing something worthwhile, is the key is in this world of character. So what do these objects, or what do these processes that these objects trigger, what role do they allow you to play? What role where do they lead you in life? So what role can you play with this prop in terms of not only self-satisfaction, but also doing something that you believe in, that may be good for society, that may be good within your own set of principles.
I have to say, flattered as I was to be invited to take part in this project, it has taken me a very long way out of my comfort zone, because I am a writer, but I am not an artist. And knowing Fay Ballard's work, as I do, I did think my response demanded something slightly more than a text, as you will see. Now, my choice of travelling companion was straightforward. It goes everywhere with me, and as you can see, it's travelled up to Cambridge with me here in this room. But the project made me think about it in much more profound ways, both as a personal possession and, as you will find out, and this has been quite painful for me, as an archetypal object. Now, people have worn rings, I assume, ever since people were first able to work metal. They're very convenient forms of portable wealth. They serve as seals, as in signet rings, like this one. They're gifts, as this one was. When exchange, as in marriage customs, they are emblems of union. Their design can signify membership of a group. They can be rewards for service. And on the hands of the powerful, their heft and glitter are also emblematic of the heft and glitter of that person. And of course, there is also the tradition of the mourning ring, which is a gift from the dead to the living. And so it's an emblem of remembrance. Rings also, we know, have magic power. Tolkien did very well. And I think this derives from the fact that in its simplest form, it is the archetypal circle, with all the properties of a perfect and unbroken continuity within itself. It's a form of infinity, without beginning or end. And at the same time, it's a focus, it's a vortex for all potential forces that can pass through. And though unbroken, it also serves as a link. As you will discover, I carry the past on my little finger, and not just mine. Past is in the present, and in this case, the ring carries with it something which must never be forgotten. So, providing the text for this particular travelling companion was not too difficult, though it was disturbing. The real problem, though, is that rings are very difficult to photograph, especially this one, which has a lovely hint of Jugendstil in its design. And I'm not an artist, I'm not a photographer, but fortunately I have a friend who is, Gavin McKinnon-Little, and I took the ring and the script to him, and it is he, Gavin, who has made it possible for me to respond to this challenge in the way that I have done.
Before I get to my feet and share anything about this with you, if you have any sense of what I have at the moment, that what Robert has chosen to share with us is so deeply profound that it has lodged in us in a way which I'm sure will leave a trace, will leave an echo, and something which is perhaps physical as well as emotional, intellectual, and psychological for all of us. So before I talk about this object, I'd like to leave some extra space for what we've just heard.
one of the great privileges of being able to go last is having heard about all kinds of extraordinary things. The relationship between the relentlessness of PhD life and the incremental transformation of exercise, and the way in which bodies are always becoming and always changing, the heroic journey of Shackleton, the pleasure of holding a slightly greasy watch connected to your incredible family and your mother's history and yours, the power of the eye and the realm of the stars, the camera and pretension. And I couldn't help but whisper in Fay's ear as you mentioned Dan Fox's book. This year, someone gave me a copy of that book for my birthday. Goodness knows what that means. Please don't speculate too much. So to put all of that together in our minds is a great privilege for each of us, including all of us who are in this horseshoe in front of you this afternoon. One more thing. And I really like this thing from Shackleton, that we have pierced the veneer of outside things. And that will stay with me today as well. So IHS, this reads, some of you will know that these initials represent the name of Jesus. IHS are some of the Greek letters for Christ. And it can also stand for Jesus Hominum Salvator, so that's Jesus, Savior of the world, and in hoc signio, like signet, in this sign, conquer. It implies conquer at the end of the sentence. So conquer what? I wondered when I first heard this as an atheist teenager, not only profoundly skeptical about religion and about its theological as well as doctrinal and cultural claims, religion of any kind, but also wondering about the way in which human beings can somehow find themselves subjected to the greatest internal as well as external demons and oppressors imaginable, and the way in which religion plays its very negative part in that all too often. So conquer what, I thought? Conquer our enemies with violent force. I was quite sure even at that time that that is not what Jesus meant, and indeed I stand by that now. And it's certainly not what I signed up for when I was 16. Conquer our fears, perhaps. Conquer the violence of darker corners, whatever and wherever they may be, with non-violent resistance that goes beyond death for the cause of love, and the cause of love only. That, I thought, was more like it. This object is a fragment, separated now from its sister fragments. It was part of a collection from the textiles workroom of an Anglican convent in Oxford. These women were radical in their prayers, in their actions, in their women-only spaces, making holy things with sacred hands, where the things themselves, like this object and all of its fragment sisters, that those things themselves are and have been blessed. This object remains a holy one no matter where it is, and most of the time I sleep on it because it lives in a cabinet which pulls out a drawer underneath my bed. It's not there right now. And it's not there right now and not here right now either, because I have lent it to someone who, interested in it as an embroiderer herself, wants to make new art inspired by this old thing from about 1900. And this thing, in its technique, as well as in its lettering and design, was inspired by a lot of imagery like this from about the 14th and 15th centuries, most of it made in Britain. It's something called Opus Anglicana. So what I'm experiencing now through the lending of that object is a revival of a revival of a revival, and I hope in those strands and patterns of woven and threaded continuity, on it goes. The textiles collection was recently dispersed, and I was responsible for cataloging a small portion of it. So it, with its refugee siblings, came, when the workroom closed, to St. Mark's Regent's Park, a church in North London. I have since worn one of the collection's Venetian chasubles when presiding at my first Mass of the Blessed Virgin Mary on an impossibly sweltering July evening only a few months ago. I have given another one of these fragments. There was another just like it, a close relative. I've given that fragment to a priest in Cambridge, so it is in this city. about a 15-minute walk away, but he doesn't know we're all here, so if we all turn up, that would be creepy. Please don't do that. But I am about to tell you approximately where it is by telling you who he is. I studied for the priesthood here in Cambridge, and it was profoundly painful at times. Some days were good, and some days were really bad. And that priest, who was the chaplain at King's College, Cambridge at the time, and is now the chaplain at John's, helped me a great deal to be able to see what IHS might mean and what the truth of Jesus' love could be about. And so I gave him the other fragment. And so he framed it and he put it in his study, and so it's about a 15-minute walk from here. He doesn't know that I have mentioned this to all of you today, and certainly not that I am being recorded. But he is a profound person who has become incorporated into what queer family can be like. There is an immense amount of power in the idea of chosen families and the way that those bodies relate to one another. So that is my traveling companion. It's not here, and it is here. It's historical, and it's inspiring new things. The silk, because the velvet is so friable, is a shredded piece, also torn from something else. I don't know what. And some of the threads are loose. I treat this object like a frail body. And just like this IHS, glittering yet fragile, each of us explore within our bodies what it is to live and die, to be glittering and to be frail, and perhaps to live again. Thanks.
Well, I'd just like to thank all the speakers. That was a really fascinating array of just not only what travelling companions can be, but also what they are. So I just wanted to say a few thank yous. I wanted to thank someone who's sitting very modestly next to the camera, Judy Goldhill. She curates this space, and I think she's just been really amazing in when you put an exhibit, you don't just bring your work to a gallery and stick it on the wall and walk away. It's about creating discussion, and you encouraged us to have this seminar. So I just wanted to thank you first. I wanted to discuss, to thank the panel, because most of them have only just met themselves, most of them have only just met each other today, and that you have travelled from far distances, and we were slightly vague, maybe in, just talk about your travelling companion. We didn't kind of engineer it in any way, so it was quite a risk for them, and I just think they've all made fantastic contributions, and the discussion that's happened from it has been really, I'm so glad it's recorded. So thank you to the panel. The final one is to Fay and Judy, who I think are the ultimate travelling companions, in that they're just very good friends, and they're really fun to work with for that reason, because it's not work. And I just think they have a very generous attitude also to their work, because they want to put it out there in order to discuss things. It's not about their work or their egos. It's like, let's just get everyone in to talk about this. So I think it's just thank you to both of you. And actually, I've got one more person to thank, which is all of you, because it's always terrifying when you, I teach in university, but when you hold a thing like this, and if nobody talks, and you're kind of going, does anyone have any questions? And and you've been absolutely fabulous and really good. So thank you for coming out.